So, a radio that's kind of pretty reliable, the Maxcom 4E, and a radio around which a lot of the UK Maxon produced sets are based. The Midland range, the Cobra, the Colt, the list goes on. So, when was this one made? Let's have a look. December 81, so it's not the first batch. Now it's got a sticker on the back which is in red, which means Mark has been through it and it doesn't work. Now the demise of quite a lot of these sets is that it's very difficult to get the power plugs these days, and to that end we've bought the crimping tools to actually make them up. But they're not cheap, even by the time we've paid 89 pence to Mr. Chippy to make them. They're about £5.99, so they're not something which is cheap. So there's one for us, so at least we can do it properly and without having to bodge wires in. If you watched the previous video on making microphones up, the microphone we made up was for this set. So it's 5-pinned in to the configuration on this particular chart that I downloaded at some point, and it's number 9. So it's audio, screen, transmit, receive. Where did that come from? Plenty of these charts out there for UK radios, and if you're not in the UK, for radios for your own country. So we'll get that connected to our power supply. It neatly wound it all up, and I've unneatly unwound it. Okay, so it's connected to the power supply, and we are lit up. It's drawing 220 milliamps. So there we go. So that's a start. There is a Super 4E which has a green display. Now the lids are already off this, and that's that's not a good sign. And the speaker's already unsoldered from this, which is another not very good sign. And the bottom lid's also off this set, which is an even worse sign. I can't see anything shouting out at me. Of course, there's always the possibility that some people think, I've had these in before where people have said it's faulty and they've actually got it switched to PA. It's Squelch and PA. So that's something to watch. Just got rid of the bit of fluff off it. We'll connect it up to the test set. Hope it's not the audio chip, because they're very, very expensive to buy today, like £33. It's a KIA 7205. To fit a TA 7205, if you like bodging things, which we don't, you'd have to remove part of the printed circuit in this area to accommodate the bigger IC. So we can hear a radio that's very off frequency. So let's see whether it transmits. Well, the Squelch works, that's a good sign. I'll just switch the picture-in-picture on, so we can both see if it transmits or not. I'm on the 3-watt scale, so full scale deflection of the meter would be 3 watts. And it's actually 2.2 watts. So it may be that Mark's rejected it because the power's low. It could be that it's slightly off frequency if it's in spec. Or it could be that the receiver's so awful that Mark's decided it needs some work doing. Right, well, we'll start with, I could talk about the VCO, but the components are often never installed on this model, and there's no reason to suspect that there is a problem with that. The wax there has never been touched, and so let's just make sure it works on channel 1 and 40. These aren't susceptible to problems like that. It works on channel 1, works on channel 40, so there's no problem there. So back to channel 20, and it will do a quick tune-up. Could this be our quickest ever service? And I was suspecting the worst. It could be the detector coils miles out, they can drift quite dramatically on Maxons. Maxcom being the company who make Maxcom. Okay, so we say 2.2 watts. So we'll stay on that scale. I've put the soldering iron on because no doubt that wax is going to have to come out. It doesn't look messed with, to be honest. So we'll just check that we're at peak on here. Yes, that was at peak. That's at peak. It isn't on low power, is it? No. That's another thing to check. I was a bit nearer 3. So we're over the 3 now. I mean, really anything over 3.2 and we're home and dry. As it's warming up, it's starting to drop down again. So I'm going to go backwards and forwards over that. I'll just pause the video while I do that. We're still at about 3.2 watts when now the set's warm. Remember, this is on my Marconi test set, which is a bit selective. It doesn't read all the signal it gets. It's in the frequency zone that it's set to, so it won't be looking at all the interference that an ordinary power meter would be looking at. So if we put this on a normal type of power meter, even if it was a good quality one, it would probably read above 4 anyway. But we go by this, and so would the government inspector if they thought it was overpower. They would go on a similar kind of test. So we'll do deviation, or shall we do the RF meter? We'll do the RF meter, why not? So what have we got? Let's key it up, and it's well over the 4. So we'll do the preset for that, which is there. Pop that down to 4. Now we'll do the deviation. This is a set that did come out of the factory a bit low. So let's see whether it's been messed with. It's actually about spot on. So let's see what it is with the voice test. Wallow. It's a bit low with the voice test, so we'll bring it up a bit. 2.2 I think will be a safe place to put it. We don't want it to exceed 2.5 ever. So deviation. It's that one there. doesn't matter how many of these I do, I've got a memory like a sieve. Wallow. Just about getting 2.2 there, so we'll leave it at that. And we'll pop it onto frequency. It's not far out. So just move camera 2 across so you can see the frequency meter. So we want 27,79125. And it's 27,79117/8, which is neither here nor there. So it's the red trimmer next to the reference crystal. I've actually gone in the right direction today. I like it slightly high so that it's got room to drop, which they do naturally with age. So 27,79126 is spot on. Well, that covers transmit, so let's go over to receive, and we'll move the camera onto the oscilloscope. Not that oscilloscope, that oscilloscope. Okay. The one on the oscilloscope on the right, so if I want to look at the quality of the transmitted audio, which I don't need to, unless there's a problem. So, it's actually, you know, when you're trying to do things quickly, instead of having one oscilloscope and switching it between functions and adjusting all the knobs on it, it's much quicker to have two oscilloscopes. And, you know, what were they, £109 each? You know, we're a business. Anything we can do to speed things up and save a couple of minutes, and it's well worth doing. So that's why there's two oscilloscopes there. So we'll go on to receive. I'm going to put a S9 equivalent signal on. And it sounds absolutely vile. Am I plugged into the right socket? Yep. Okay, so over to receive with an S9 signal on the oscilloscope. Let's see whether we can improve the detector, which I suspect will be out on this radio. The detector coil is the one there. Well, it was out, but only marginally. So now I'll tell you what, while we've some of these have an S meter adjustment and some don't. So with S9, the radio is reading S4. I can't remember which that one is. That'll be Squelch. This is one of the sets that doesn't have an adjustment for the meter. Sometimes it's a preset which has been soldered onto the back of the meter there. So you'd say it was a lazy needle, to be honest. It needs what I'd expect to be a plus 20 signal to read S9. But we don't do modifications, that's company policy, so that's the way the radio is made. And there's nothing new about that. I mean, if you've looked at some of the new sets we've been doing recently, there is no meter preset on a lot of them these days. So disappointing, but you know, that's how it is. So we'll get on with the tune-up. So we'll pop the Squelch down, shove the camera onto the cyanide meter, and turn that down to about 4 decibels, about there, by adjusting the attenuator on the oscilloscope, on the signal generator for less signal. It's about there. and go through the front end. Well, that's an improvement. I'll drop the attenuator. Now we'll turn the signal generator up a bit, because I now want to look at quality as well as cyanide. So we'll have that to about 10 decibels. So I'm now looking at the oscilloscope as well as the cyanide meter. In fact, I'll zoom out so you can also see what I'm looking at, if that's possible. There's a compromise between the two. See, we've got a definite quality peak just there. And again just there. And then with this IF, we're about there. Just going back to transmit, let's turn that down. I wonder if that preset is for low power and I've upset it. So we'll go back to transmit. So that's full power, we're on the 3-watt scale. That's low power. Yes, it's low power. So there we are. It's supposed to be 400 milliwatts. We're bang on the money there, 400 milliwatts. If you didn't see that, that's 10, so it's 1 watt. That's 0.5, so that's 0.4. So that'll be the only preset left is Squelch. So we'll go back to receive. I may as well switch the picture in picture off. And let's put the signal generator to 100 microvolts, which is S9, and we can squelch that out, which we don't want to be able to do. So we'll drop the Squelch preset, that's full Squelch, S9, and the radio has squelched it out, which we don't want. So we'll pop this preset down until that just comes in, and I mean just. So it's there. Go back. It's there. So we'll go to 30 microvolts, so I'll turn the attenuator. And back again, so the hysteresis kept it in, but going back to 30 microvolts, it's not sounding. Go back to 100 microvolts. And we have it. So that's now set where I want it to be. So now we'll look at the other end of the scale. I'll park the signal generator at 0.3 of a microvolt and turn the Squelch down. So now we advance the Squelch to threshold and switch the signal generator back on. And it's come in at 0.3 of a microvolt. Goes out at 2.5, 0.25 a microvolt, comes back in at 0.3. So that Squelch is fine the way it's now set. So that brings us to, let's get a cyanide reading. So we'll get the notebook out. I think it must have been the very low power on transmit with it being 2 watts. That must have been why Mark rejected it. Maxcom 4E. 20 dB synad. 10 dB, 12 dB synad. And 10 dB synad. So, not all radios are saying you can manage 20 on, because if you've got noisy transistors, that is not going to happen. So we're now at 3 microvolts, 2 microvolts, 1 microvolt, no. So let's attenuate it from there. Actually, it's astonishingly good. We're at 0.61 for 20 dB synad. So let's go for the 12. Oops, the Squelch was coming. Just change scales. Like a lot of sets, it's between the scales. So it's 0.31 to be honest. And then 10 decibel. It's about there. It's 0.29. So a very useful set. Right, well, I'll tell you what, we'll screw it together in that case. It's certainly done a bit of work over its years. It's got some wear on those lids. Just have a quick check which audio hot is. If I unplug our extension speaker and touch it, the inner, yes, the yellow one is audio hot. Because I didn't unsolder it, we'll just tin those leads. And the positive is the right, because it says never be tempted to blow on solder cooling. So all we want now is a pile of screws. It's going to cost a fortune in new screws. So these are Maxcom RS4830934, which are the correct black screws for CBs, usually. Sometimes you find, instead of M3s, they're M2.5s, and sometimes you also find the self-tappers, which is very annoying. When the self-tappers are missing, we usually get the tap tool and tap the thread for M3 or something appropriate like that. Because when the self-tappers are usually mashed up, or they've got wood screws poking out. There's nothing worse is than mashed up screws. So let's hope all the threads are intact on this, but it doesn't look very messed about with. I once bought a Power Devil electric screwdriver, and it was so rubbish. I think it was a 2.4 volt one, but even when you loosened the screws of either a CB radio, we were doing a lot of video recorders at the time, it still didn't have the strength to shift them. What a rubbish product. So as a church organist, I don't worry about finger exercises, so don't mind using a few screwdrivers and keeping our strength up. There we are. So we'll swap the test instrument, flick it to high power just before we leave. We'll just see what the power actually now is. It's about 3.2, 3.3, somewhere around there. It really doesn't matter. It isn't faulty. If it was something like 2.9 or something under there, then I would have to start changing parts, but it isn't, so we're fine. So I'll pop the aerial in, flick round, 19 Roger. I think they're all wrapping presents. Absolutely unbelievable. Nobody on at all. So, just goes to show, doesn't it? Mind you, we're 7 miles from anything and 35 miles from the nearest city. So there you have it. The ubiquitous Maxcom 4E from 1981. And it just wanted a bit of a service. Thank you for watching.